The gate groaned as Evelyn Harrow pushed it open, iron hinges shrieking through the mist-soaked silence like the cry of a wounded thing. The estate loomed before her, a skeleton of its former grandeur. Ivy strangled the once proud columns, and the wide veranda sagged under the weight of decay. The house smelled of old wood, whetstone, and time long buried, like a crypt left open too long. She stepped over the threshold with dust swirling around her boots, the kind of silence settling that was less absence of sound than the breath held by the dead. The year was 1887, and the frontier had moved on from this patch of Arkansas Riverland. The Harrow estate, once a jewel of Southern wealth, now lay forgotten, half swallowed by fog and folklore. Only the brave, or the broken, came back here. Evelyn was both. Her dress clung to her thighs, damp with travel and river mist. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed her sharp cheekbones and eyes darkened from sleepless nights. She carried little, a carpet bag, a pistol she hadn't fired in years, and a letter addressed to no one but the wind. Her gaze swept across the room as she entered. The parlor was as she remembered, though hollowed by time. The piano in the corner stood, with a few keys chipped like missing teeth. The fireplace was black with soot, the mantel above it bearing only a cracked photograph in a silver frame. She reached for it. Half of Rowan's face stared back at her, smiling young and vivid even in ruin. The rest of the photo was torn away, eaten by flame or something hungrier. She ran her thumb across the unburned edge, a tear threatening at the corner of her eye, but she blinked it back. She had promised herself no tears this time. The wind rattled the window panes. In the town of Greystone Hollow, they still whispered about the Harrow boy who walked into the river and never came back. They called it a drowning, but Evelyn never believed it. Rowan was no fool. He could read the river's moods better than any man. It wasn't water that took him. It was the house. Upstairs, the hallway creaked under her steps. Dust danced in sunbeams that slanted through a broken window like stained glass in a forgotten chapel. She stopped outside what had been his study. The brass knob was cold. Turning it, she stepped inside. The scent hit her first, cedar, ink-old tobacco. Everything was still in place, the leather chair, the heavy desk, papers yellowed with time. She crossed to the far corner, knelt, and pulled at the loose floorboard she remembered. Beneath it, a box. Inside, a handful of letters and a small leather-bound journal. She hesitated before opening it. The pages inside were brittle and brown. The handwriting was his, slanted, quick, restless. July 2nd, 1882. Asterisk, I heard the whispering again. In the walls this time. Maybe it's the house settling. Maybe it's something else. Asterisk, she turned the page. July 9th. Asterisk, Evelyn doesn't believe me. I wouldn't either. But the dreams are getting worse. I wake with my hands wet. Sometimes I smell the river on my skin. Asterisk, Evelyn closed the journal slowly. Her hands trembled. Her mind flitted back to the last night they had together. There had been rain. Thunder crawled across the sky like a wounded beast. Rowan stood by the hearth, eyes wild with something he refused to name. I saw something in the river, he said. You were drunk, she snapped, more from fear than anger. I wasn't. I heard it call my name. She remembered how he kissed her then. Not gentle, not desperate, but final. I'll fix it, he said. For us. And then he was gone. She'd searched for him in the rain, her boots sinking into the mud near the water's edge, calling his name into a night that swallowed sound. The next morning, all they found was his coat, floating, empty, and she'd made the promise to forget. But the tears betrayed her, always. A sound stirred behind her, a soft knock. She turned. Nothing. No breeze. No sign of life. Still, the air had changed. Heavier. She crossed the hallway again, this time toward the master bedroom. The door opened with a low sigh. She stopped dead. The mirror above the dresser was fogged over, as though someone had just breathed upon it. Her hand lifted without permission, fingertips grazing the glass. A shape flickered behind her reflection. Tall, lean, unmoving. She spun around. Empty. But her heart didn't believe what her eyes told her. She moved back down the stairs, breath quickening. The light was failing fast now. Dusk came early on this land, especially in a house that didn't like to be watched. In the kitchen, she lit a match, touched it to a lantern, and let the glow bloom in golden halos. The house groaned, with flexing like a rib cage breathing. The door rattled suddenly, then burst open. Evelyn drew her pistol fast, but it was only the wind. She cursed under her breath, stepped outside, and scanned the darkening trees. Nothing but mist, the sound of crickets, the rustle of branches. Then movement. At the edge of the clearing, down by the river, a figure. Her heart skipped. He was standing there, just as he had in her dreams. Rowan, or something that wore his face, coat unbuttoned, dark hair curled at the collar, his eyes catching the moonlight. She stepped forward. Rowan, but as she blinked, he vanished, gone like smoke. She remained frozen for long seconds, until the chill in her bones became too deep to bear. Back inside, she bolted the door and set the lantern near her feet. Then she opened the journal again. August 2nd. Asterisk, I found the chapel beneath the house. Grandfather's place. There are names scratched into the stone there. Harrow men. All drowned. Or so the town thinks. I think it's something else. We're being claimed. One by one, asterisk. She frowned. A chapel? She had never seen one. Then again, the Harrow estate was older than it appeared. Generations of secrets could be buried in its bones. The candle beside her flickered violently, and then she heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. Her breath caught in her throat. She rose, pistol in hand, and crept toward the staircase. Each step upward was a lifetime. The footsteps had stopped, but the silence was worse. On the landing, something shifted in the shadows. She raised the pistol. Who's there? She demanded, voice hard despite the tremble. Nothing. She stepped closer to the door at the end of the hall, Rowan's old room. The knob turned under her hand, and the door creaked inward. The room was empty. And yet, the scent hit her again. River water. And something else, rotted lilies. The kind she placed on his grave, though there was no body beneath the stone. She turned, about to leave, when a whisper grazed her ear. Evie. Her name. She ran. Back down the stairs, breath ragged, heart thundering. She dropped the pistol on the parlor table, pressed both palms into the wood, and forced herself to breathe. She had come back to forget, but forgetting had never been an option. Not when mirrors remembered, not when footsteps echoed in rooms that should be empty, not when the river still bore the scent of a man who had never truly left. Later, when the wind died and the house grew still, Evelyn sat at the hearth and stared into the cold ashes. She held the torn photograph, her thumb now smudged with soot. Her other hand trembled near the journal, unwilling to turn the next page. She knew, even then, that she would. But for now, she sat in the half-light of memory and sorrow. Outside, the moon broke through the clouds. The river gleamed silver and still. And there, at the very edge of the trees, Rowan stood once more, watching, waiting. Evelyn rose slowly, stepping to the window. Her eyes didn't waver. I'm not leaving this time, she whispered. And in the stillness, the mirror behind her fogged once again. This time, it spelled a single word. Remember. She did. And the first tear fell, not from grief, but from something colder, deeper, more dangerous. The house knew she was back, and it was just beginning. The sun rose like an ember behind a veil of fog, bleeding pale gold into the morning mist. Evelyn stood at the riverbank, her boots sinking into the damp earth as she stared at the place where Rowan had vanished. The water was still, deceptively serene, its surface glinting with the chill breath of dawn. Beneath it, secrets waited, unmoved by time or tears. Her fingers clutched Rowan's journal tightly. She had read it through the night by the dim light of the hearth, every line deepening the hollow behind her ribs. There was something buried here, more than memory, more than grief. The journal didn't speak of madness. No, it spoke with the careful clarity of a man who knew what hunted him. She turned back toward the house. It loomed on the rise like a broken tooth, its silhouette split by the light of day. The windows were blind. The walls held their breath. Evelyn returned to the study, the journal heavy in her hand. She laid it open across the desk and scanned again the entry that had kept her awake. Asterisk August 6th. The chapel exists, beneath the east wing, under the floor where no light ever touches. Grandfather's legacy lies there, carved in stone and silence. It began with him, and it ends with me. Asterisk, the east wing had collapsed years ago, its bones rotting beneath ivy and caved-in beams. Still, Evelyn dressed for ruin, leather gloves, oil lantern, a bandana tied tight across her face against the mold and dust. She pried open the warped door that led to the wing, stepping into darkness that swallowed the light whole. The air was thick, not just with decay, but with something older, like the breath of a long-sealed tomb. Boards snapped beneath her weight. She moved slowly, the lantern swaying. Beneath her, the floor groaned like it resented her presence. In the far corner, covered by a splintered shelf and collapsed masonry, she found it a trapdoor. The iron ring was rusted but gave under her pull. A breath of cold, wet air exhaled from below. She lowered the lantern first, then descended the narrow stone steps into the dark. The chapel was not large. The walls were stone, slick with moss. A stone altar stood at the far end, etched with names she didn't recognize, yet all of them bore the Harrow name. Dates stretched back to the Revolution. Most of them ended the same way. Drowned. Her breath caught. One name was newer, barely aged, the letters rough, as if carved by a trembling hand. Rowan Harrow, 1882, drowned. Evelyn reached forward, fingertips brushing the name. A voice behind her murmured, "I didn't want you to find this." She whirled. Rowan stood just beyond the lantern's glow, his form faint, more suggestion than substance. His eyes, those same solemn eyes, watched her not with surprise but sorrow. "You're real," she whispered. "God help me, you're real." He stepped forward, and though his feet made no sound, the water beneath them rippled. "You weren't supposed to come back." Tears burned her throat. "You vanished. No one told me why. You left me with silence." "I had to," he said. "It was the only way to keep you safe. The curse, it doesn't take those who forget, only those who remember." She approached, her hand trembling, aching to touch him. But when she reached for him, he stepped back. "Don't," he warned. "Not yet. You wrote of grandfather, of a legacy." He nodded. He struck a bargain long ago. When this land was stolen from the tribes, he paid a price. Blood. The river was sacred to them, and he desecrated it, built over it, used it, so it claimed him and every Harrow after. Evelyn felt her knees weaken. "Why not tell me?" "Because it binds to memory," Rowan said. "If you love one it has claimed, if you mourn them, it begins to see you too. That's why I burned the photograph. Why I never let you say goodbye." She backed away, shaking her head. "Then why show yourself now?" His voice was soft, pained. "Because you never forgot me. Because your tears, they fed it. And now it's coming for you." The ground trembled. The lantern flickered. A noise echoed above. Timbers cracking, something massive shifting. Rowan turned sharply toward the steps. "You have to go," he said, urgency rising. "If you stay, it will keep you here, like it kept me." "I'm not leaving without you," she said. "You can't save me, but you can end it. Burn the journal. Break the memory." The light from the lantern flared suddenly, then died. Evelyn was alone in the dark. She scrambled up the steps, breath ragged, fingers clawing at the cold stone. When she reached the surface, light slammed into her, no longer morning, but full day. She ran from the east wing as a low groan echoed behind her. The wing collapsed further, dust billowing upward like a dying breath. Back in the parlor, she threw the journal onto the table. Her hands hovered over it. Burn it, he had said. End it. But this journal was all she had left of him, his words, his thoughts, his truth. If she destroyed it, would she forget him? Would she lose him all over again? She stared down at the pages, lips parting. Then she slammed the cover shut. Not yet. She needed answers. She needed to speak to someone who remembered. She rode into Greystone Hollow by afternoon, the town looking more hollowed than she recalled. The store's awning sagged, the church bell hung silent. At the edge of town stood the chapel where her mother had once prayed, and beside it the rectory where the Reverend Gideon lived. He was old now, older than death itself, it seemed, but his mind was sharp, and his voice was like dry paper against stone. He opened the door before she knocked. I wondered how long it'd take before the Harrow girl came back. Evelyn stepped inside. The walls were lined with books, icons, crucifixes, and behind the Reverend's desk, a dusty map of the Riverlands. I need to know about the curse, she said. He didn't pretend not to understand. Your great-grandfather made a deal with something he didn't understand. Took land that was never his. Buried bones where rivers once ran. And the river took him. No, Gideon said. The land did. The river's just its mouth. He sat slowly, gnarled hands folding. You can't kill it. It's older than our words. But you can starve it. Evelyn leaned forward. How? Cut the memory. Silence the grief. Burn the record. Rowan said the same. Gideon looked her in the eye. Then he still has a piece of himself. But not for long. The more he lingers, the more it feeds. I want to bring him back. You can't, Gideon said. But you can free him. She left the rectory with her mind burning. By the time she returned to the estate, dusk had begun its slow descent. The sky turned the color of a healing bruise, and the river shimmered like polished steel. The wind had grown colder, harsher, and the house met her return with a long creak of its bones. Inside, she lit every lamp, every candle. Shadows danced on the walls like memories trying to take shape. She stood before the hearth, the journal in her hands. She looked at Rowan's handwriting, the curve of letters shaped by the same hand that once brushed hair from her eyes. She remembered his laugh, his breath on her shoulder, the last kiss laced with fear. Her tears dripped onto the page. Outside, the wind screamed. The front door burst open. Water swept in. Not just water. Voices in it, hundreds, thousands, crying out. She dropped the journal. Rowan stood in the doorway, soaked, pale, eyes glowing faintly like lantern glass. You have to choose, he said, voice cracking. I can't, she whispered. It'll take you, Evie. She stepped forward, reached for him. This time, her hand passed through his chest. He flinched as though it hurt. I'm already gone, he said. But if you hold on, it'll drag you under too. She looked down at the journal. The ink was running. His words were drowning. With trembling hands, she lifted it, walked to the hearth, and fed it to the fire. The flames caught quick. They roared. Pages curled, blackened. Outside, the wind ceased. The house held its breath. Rowan stood still, watching her with something like peace. His form began to dim. You never forgot me, he said. That's what saved me. I loved you, she whispered, and I loved you. The fire burned low. Rowan stepped backward into the dark, and was gone. The silence afterward was complete. No wind, no voices, just the soft crackle of fire and the sound of Evelyn weeping, not in sorrow, but in relief. The curse was broken, but so was her heart. She gathered the ashes when the fire cooled and carried them to the river. There, beneath the light of stars, she let them scatter into the current. Rowan's final words echoed in her mind. You never forgot me. As the water claimed the ashes, Evelyn turned from the riverbank and walked back to the house. Behind her, the river ran quiet, but deep beneath the surface, something shifted, watching, waiting. The morning after the fire, the Harrow estate stood silent, cloaked in ash-gray fog. The wind no longer groaned through the shutters. The mirror above the mantel was clean, cold, and clear, no breath, no messages. The river, in the distance, meandered like it always had, quiet and unbothered. Yet Evelyn Harrow knew better than to believe in stillness. She woke with her limbs heavy and her mind tangled in fragments of dreams. Rowan's face half illuminated in lantern light, his voice cracking, his silhouette dissolving into night. She had burned the journal, freed him, but not herself. Some part of her still felt hollow, like the fire had taken more than paper and ink. Outside, the day wore the color of old bones. Evelyn gathered her coat, laced her boots, and strapped the old Colt .36 to her side. The Reverend's words rang in her ears, Asterisk, you can't kill it, but you can starve it. Asterisk, she'd starved it of Rowan. Now it hungered for her. She descended the hill alone, following the edge of the tree line toward the eastern bluff where the river narrowed and deepened. This was where Rowan used to fish, where he once pressed a kiss to her wrist and whispered, Asterisk, when I go, you'll feel it in the trees. Asterisk, she felt it now. Beneath her boots, the ground grew damp. The trees seemed to bow inward, and the air turned to breath, wet, slow, and alive. She reached the bluff and stopped short. The water wasn't right. It churned, not from current or wind, but from beneath, as though something enormous stirred far below the surface. Ripples rolled outward in unnatural rhythm, pulsing like a heartbeat. The river had never wanted her here. Rowan had said as much, but she wasn't here to be wanted. She was here to finish it. She crouched at the edge of the bluff, fingertips grazing the moss-streaked stone. Her voice cut through the silence, steady and low. You've taken enough. There was no reply, but the wind dropped and the water grew still. Then a shape emerged, a blackened cross, worn down by time, half submerged in the shallows. She climbed down the slope, knees braced, eyes sharp. The moment she touched the cross, the air shifted. Memories that were not hers flooded her mind. Men standing in a circle, torches raised, blood in the soil. She saw Rowan's grandfather driving stakes into the riverbank, declaring the land his with a bottle in one hand and a pistol in the other. She saw the first sacrifice, a native boy, barefoot, eyes like fire, thrown into the water with rope binding his limbs. The river did not accept it quietly. The vision vanished. Evelyn gasped and fell to her knees, the moss cold against her palms. She understood now. It wasn't a curse. It was a debt. One paid in memory, one inherited by blood. She needed a way to sever it. From the folds of her coat, she pulled a small lockbox, the last thing she had taken from Rowan's study. Inside, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, lay two things: the locket he once gave her and a charred page from the journal she hadn't burned with the rest. The locket clicked open with a whisper. Inside, his portrait, faded but intact, and beneath it, a tiny scrap of parchment, folded once, fragile with age. It read, Asterisk, the river remembers names. Asterisk, she stood. If names bind, she said aloud, then mine will unbind. She stepped into the river. The cold struck fast, up her calves, her thighs, her waist. She waded until the current tugged at her hips. The bluff behind her receded. The forest closed in. She clutched the locket to her chest. I release you, she whispered. Rowan Harrow, I free your name. The river groaned. A great crack split the air, like lightning without light. The water surged. She stumbled but did not fall. From the depth, shapes rose, faces without eyes, hands without bodies. They reached, not for her, but for the locket. She raised it high. I remember him, so you don't have to. The water exploded upward, a column of silver and shadow. Then silence. All at once, the current fell away. The river turned still, and she stood alone, chest heaving, soaked and shivering, the locket gone, taken from her fingers by invisible hands. She stared at the place where it vanished, and for the first time, she felt no pain, just weightlessness. Like a breath she hadn't known she was holding had finally been exhaled. Behind her, the trees swayed in a rhythm not their own. She turned and walked out of the river, boots squelching against the mud, dress clinging to her skin. When she crested the bluff again, she found someone waiting. A boy, no older than 10, barefoot, eyes like fire. He stared at her. She stepped closer, heart lodged in her throat. Who are you? He blinked slowly. Then he spoke, voice ancient and small. You broke the chain. And then he smiled, not with joy but with peace. He stepped back, and with each step he faded. By the time she reached the edge, he was gone. That night, Evelyn did not return to the estate. She camped by the river with only the stars for company. The fire crackled beside her, and the cold never touched her bones. She dreamed, yes, but not of Rowan, not of death. She dreamed of water flowing over stone, of names forgotten, of songs sung in languages no longer spoken. When she woke at dawn, the river looked different. Younger. The fog had lifted. The wind no longer howled. She packed her things, saddled the gray mare she'd borrowed from the hollow, and turned toward the east road. As the estate disappeared behind the trees, she did not look back. In town, the folk watched her with quiet awe. The Reverend met her at the chapel steps, eyes soft and searching. "It's done," she said. He nodded, more to himself than to her. "You did what no hero ever could." "I'm not a hero," she said. "Not anymore." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps now no one is?" She left Greystone Hollow before noon, the sun casting long shadows behind her as she rode into open country. The road was rough, but the sky was clear. She did not carry Rowan's picture. She did not carry his words. But she carried his peace, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, the townspeople said the river changed. The eddies no longer pulled cattle under. The water ran clean. Fish returned. And the voices in the wind? Gone. Some claimed they saw a woman at the river's edge just after sunset, tall, dark-haired, eyes like the storm. She stood without speaking, without weeping, watching the current with a quiet sort of strength. Then she would vanish into the woods. Others said she never existed at all. But the river remembered. And perhaps that was enough. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this: the past is never quiet. It waits beneath the surface, in water, in earth, in blood. But it does not own us. We are not just the sum of those we've lost. We are what we choose to carry forward, what we choose to leave behind. And sometimes, remembering is the only way to let go. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Speak it aloud. Not all curses were chains. Some wear names. And some are broken when we dare to love past the silence. Let the river rest. Let the memory drift. The sound came at midnight. Not wind. Not rain. Not animal. It was the slow groan of timber under weight, of footsteps across rotted boards in a house no longer lived in, only haunted. Evelyn Harrow sat upright in her cot, sweat cooling on her neck. The fire had died to embers. She gripped the revolver, lying beside her, heart knocking hard against her ribs. She had left the estate behind. She had burned the journal. She had broken the chain. The boy said so. The river had calmed. And yet the sound had followed her here, 50 miles east in a ridge town called Elkhorn Pass, where the mountains rose like jagged teeth and strangers rarely stayed the night. She'd taken a room above the saloon, paid in silver, and asked for no name. But something had remembered. She slipped on her boots and coat, the gun cold in her hand. She crept across the floor to the window and drew back the curtain. The street below was empty. Moonlight spilled in silver sheets across the dusty road. The horse trough was still. The sheriff's post sat in shadow. But down the slope, where the river forked again through the canyon, a shape stood, motionless, barely visible. Her throat tightened. Not Rowan. Too tall. Too wide in the shoulders. It stood with its head bowed, arms at its sides as though waiting. Evelyn cursed under breath. The boy at the river had said it was broken, but debts that old don't vanish. They linger. They evolve. The townspeople would be next. She gathered what little she owned. Coat, gun, the scrap of charred journal she hadn't managed to burn, and descended the stairs without a sound. She passed the barkeep asleep with a shotgun across his lap and stepped out into the night. The air was thin and sharp with mountain cold. Her boots whispered across gravel. At the edge of town, she paused. The shape was gone. Then the whisper came, not in her ear, but inside her. "You took what was mine." She spun. Nothing behind her. She turned again. The figure stood now 20 feet away. She saw it clearer. It wore a wide-brimmed hat like Rowan's. Its face was pale, carved with lines of something older than sorrow. Its eyes were empty, and in its left hand it held a pocket watch ticking. Not Rowan. Not human. The blood remembers, it said. Evelyn lifted the Colt. "You want a harrow?" she said. "Come and try." It did. Fast, too fast. She fired once, missed, the shot cracking like a whip in silence. The figure crossed the space between them in seconds. She tumbled backward down the slope, the revolver skidding from her hand. It stood above her, pocket watch ticking still. "Rowan died to free you," she growled, "and I burned the chain?" The figure knelt. It leaned in close. The stench of rot and river silt filled her nose. Its voice was barely a breath. "Asterisk, you burned ink. Not memory. Asterisk." Its hand reached for her chest. She kicked hard, connected with its knee, rolled left and scrambled up. Her boot caught the revolver. She fired again, closer this time. The bullet struck it square in the chest. It staggered, but it didn't fall. It just smiled. Its mouth was a line of teeth that didn't belong in any man's jaw. She ran. Through the pines, toward the church that stood on the hill. The bell tower was rusted. The roof bowed. But something in her remembered that fire-chased shadow. And if this was a shadow of memory, she would burn it out. The thing followed, slow now, as if it knew she'd come to understand. In the chapel, she found a broken oil lantern and flint. No candles, no kindling. But the cloth inside her coat pocket, the old harrow kerchief Rowan used to carry, would burn. She placed the journal scrap beneath it. One spark. Two. The third caught. Flames licked up fast, hungry. She faced the door. "You're bound to the blood," she said, "but not me. I was never his wife. I carry no heir. You have no claim." The door creaked open. It stepped in. The fire lit its face full now. Not a man's face. Not anymore. Bone and river weed twisted into skin. A spirit of rot and stolen names. It raised the watch. The clock stops when the last harrow breathes their last. Then, "I'll take that breath now," Evelyn said and struck the lantern. The fire exploded outward, flames roaring through dry wood and stained pews. The spirit shrieked, hand rising to shield itself. The watch fell. Evelyn dove for it, scooped it up, and smashed it against the altar stone. The ticking stopped. The spirit howled, a sound like 1,000 grieving voices, and vanished in a torrent of ash and wind. The fire climbed higher. Evelyn stumbled through the smoke, coughing, the flames chasing her out the side door. She collapsed in the dirt, sucking cold air, the shattered watch still in her palm. Behind her, the chapel burned clean. When morning came, the townsfolk gathered, eyes wide. Some murmured about lightning. Others swore it was vengeance from the mountain gods. But the sheriff found her sitting by the ruin, calm, clothes singed, skin blistered. "What the hell happened here?" he asked. Evelyn rose, dusted off her coat. "A funeral," she said. He looked at her like she'd grown a second head. She turned, walked past him, and didn't stop. By sundown, she had left Elkhorn Pass behind. No whispers followed her. No shadows stepped from trees. Just wind, clean and cold. Somewhere deep in the west, the land stretched open wide, untouched, unburdened. She didn't know where she'd stop next, or what name she'd give when asked. But for the first time since Rowan vanished, she felt no weight. The blood no longer remembered. The river no longer whispered. And the last arrow was finally free.